Good afternoon. My name is Teresa Levy. I'm the Executive Director for Children's Services for Dorset Council, and really wanted to welcome those of you who have already been able to join. We know now over the last few weeks operating online in this way, as we've had to during the COVID-19, is that sometimes getting people onto the meeting in good time is the biggest challenge. So I'm hoping that more people will be able to join as we go forward. So just first of all, a few kind of practical matters, if I might. We are recording this session, and so that just for the fact that you'll be aware, and we will be able to put that onto our website for people who are unable to join in for the conversation today. People who are joining in as a Q&A process from the general public won't be seen on screen. I'm hoping that people who are able to answer questions here within the local authority will be able to be visible to you. I'm joined by a number of colleagues in this informal session. So really just to remind ourselves that this is a pre-planning process of informal conversation, which we're really glad to be able to have. Obviously, I guess we'd normally do it in a church hall or somewhere. This is just our opportunity really to do it in this way whilst we can't all get into a public space together. So I'm joined by Stuart Riddle, who's our head of commissioning, who'll be able to talk a lot about this project with you. He's been doing a huge amount of work on it, and Paul Scoven, who does our buildings work and in our capital assets team. We've got some technical specialists on hand if we need them. So as well as Paul, who's got that property construction building expertise, we've got Tess Allison with us, who's a lead landscape architect. Nisha Gaffney and John Butcher, some architectural technicians there in terms of some of the opportunities there, and we've also got some planning colleagues on hand should we need their support. So my hope is that as we go through, if you have any questions that are technical beyond me, I'll have the people on hand to be able to take us through that. So this is an exciting development for us in Dorset, and we're really pleased actually that it's in the Weymouth area. We think this is the right time and the right place and the right time for us to be doing this important work. Clearly, operating in COVID-19 times has been really challenging for us, as I'm sure it has been for many members of the public, and we've been working very hard to mitigate any of those pressures for our children and families, but it is a constant challenge. We know that families generally want the best for their children, and generally families are the best place for children to be brought up, and we're working very hard with all of our partners to make sure that as we go forward and into the future, more and more of our children stay with their families and are cared for safely and securely in their families, either in their immediate family or in their extended family. So that's the biggest part of our focus as Children's Services, and we want to do that by having families at the heart of our decision making. However, as you'll all be very aware, there are some children who, for a multitude of reasons, are unable to live with their families. Some of those children will have experienced trauma and upset and abuse, and some of those children may have, as a result of some of those issues, real difficulties in school, real difficulties with their emotional well-being, and have also then got themselves into a place where actually they're both troubled and troubling. But my reality around most of our looked after children is that they really are, as one of our foster carers said to us the other night, an absolute privilege to care for. And you know, when I see our foster carers talking about their children in that way, it's a real privilege to be able to lead that service too. So we have in the present time in Dorset 482 looked after children in our care, and they range from tiny babies up to 18. So a child ceases to be in our care at the age of 18, at which point they become care leavers, and we still have really important responsibilities to them, but they cease to be in our care. So of those 480 children, a significant number, sadly, are presently placed outside of the county. And we don't want that for a whole range of reasons. Firstly, they're our children. You know, we talk in the local authority about corporate parenting. It's not a great phraseology, but what it means really is that as Director of Children's Services and any other member of the senior team, we consider these children to be as if they were ours, and work towards ensuring that they have the same life outcomes that we'd want for our own children and children that we know and love. So having them a long way away from their home, having them a long way away from us, isn't our objective. We know it's much harder for us to place children in a range of settings. If they're placed 50, 100 miles away from Dorset, it's much harder for us to have those relationships with that school or that mental health support team or that social work service. So we actually are often working in a much more elongated, long distance way than we'd want to be. We want our children to be in their community, because the evidence is really overwhelming that when children do leave care, often at the age of 18 and sometimes a little bit before that, they come home. They come back to where they were. And we want that to be a place that's familiar to them, a place where they've got the links and the connections still there. So we really are keen to have our children in Dorset, and this project is the beginning of a range of options, both residential and fostering, to see more of our Dorset children in Dorset cared for locally. Next slide. So this particular project, I'm going to hand you on now to Stuart Riddle to talk you through the developments which are really exciting and I think very hopeful around 45 Dorchester Road. Stuart.
Thank you, Teresa. This is a plan view of 45 Dorchester Road. So as neighbours, you'll recognise some elements of it and some elements you'll think are new. As Teresa said, we really want to bring our children homes. We want that children who have to come into care in Dorset to be able to stay in Dorset. And in the case of Weymouth, about a third of our children come from Weymouth. And so it's really important that we're able to give them a home in Weymouth where they can maintain their schooling, maintain contact with their friends, maintain the continuity of their healthcare, and maintain contact with their families. So we're trying to do two things on this site. On the right side of the screen, you'll see a two-storey building with 8 windows on the first floor, and that's going to be a children's home. So that will be a children's home for up to 5 young people. Probably it will end up being a children's home for 4 young people. The age range isn't set down yet because we haven't registered it yet with Ofsted, and we haven't set the statement of purpose, but they're likely to be older young children, so certainly 14 to 16-year-olds. Perhaps it will be registered for 12-year-olds and up, but that will depend on what the need is as we get closer to the opening and the conversations that we have with our regulator as we get towards opening. So the brief that we've given to the architects is this is a home. Children are going to live here for a period of time. Perhaps they'll finish their childhood here, do their GCSEs and do their further education here. So it's got to feel homely, it's got to feel part of the neighbourhood. They shouldn't feel singled out, and it should be able to do all the things for them that a normal family home does. So give them somewhere that's safe, warm, secure, with people who are able to care for them and meet their needs, and some pleasant outdoor space where they can play if they're younger, or where they can relax if they're older. So Paul will talk you through more of the technical aspects of that, but that's what we basically said to our property team. We want this place to feel like home. Now, on the left-hand side of the image, you'll see the current building there, 45 Dorchester Road, which is the former registry office. So we've considered how we can make the best use of that building, and you'll be aware that it's an old building. It's a rather complicated internal structure, and what we're going to do there is to place two flatlets in there, which will effectively be 2 single-bedded children's home, and what we're hoping is that most of the time those are not occupied, but that is going to be part of our service which we're setting up to prevent children coming into care, and also where they do come into care into an emergency, to make sure that they can return to family life as soon as possible, either with a foster family or back to their own families. So these will be this will be accommodation where in an emergency, Friday night, Saturday night, something like that, we can accommodate a young person safely and securely with a team of staff who will be able to look after them, but also do the work with them to get them back home or back to a foster placement. And on the ground floor of the building, we're going to provide some facilities so that we can have supervised contact for children who need to have contact with their families, with staff supervision in place. So most of the life of the site will happen in the children's home. There'll be some things happening in 45 Dorchester Road as well, but this is a site that will be staffed 24 hours a day and throughout the year. So there'll be a constant presence of people there, and there'll be the children who live there. We don't anticipate that this will be a huge number of staff working there, so usually in the children's home there'd be 2 to 3 staff on duty at any one time, and in the emergency provision we might have 1 or 2 staff on duty. So that's the sort of numbers that we're talking about with the workforce. But we think this is a great place to build a children's home, because obviously it's handy for Weymouth College, it's on a bus route, it's easy access for those children to any of the schools in Weymouth that they might be attending, yeah, we want them to be in the heart of the community. So I'll leave it there and hand over to Paul, who will talk to you about the site.
Good afternoon, I'm Paul Scothen. I'm the Service Manager for Property and Capital Projects Commissioning, and I'm supporting Children's Services, as Teresa alluded to at the beginning of this discussion, in delivering this from a property perspective. As Stuart's already mentioned, 45 Dorchester Road has had a life previously as Registrar's Office. It is a site owned by Dorset Council. It is part of the local conservation area, so as we've developed the proposals for the children's home going forward, we've done it in liaison with both the conservation and planning officers to make sure that what we're coming up with will be something that they are comfortable with when an application is presented to them. The sketch drawing that you saw on the previous slide and that you may have had on leaflets you will have received, it was produced to give an indication of the size and scale of the new home, which, as Stuart said, is the sort of black looking building in the centre of the 2 buildings on 45 Dorchester Road and the adjoining property at Kildare Court. This building, the new building, is intended to replace the mobile classroom, which currently sits on the site, which is partially hidden behind a high wall facing Dorchester Road. And we've tried to make sure we've kept the building line of the new building back behind the existing lines of both 45 Dorchester Road and Kildare Court. Again, as Stuart's alluded to, we want this property to be homely, so we've intended to be more residential in its look and not too institutionalised. It sits well, we think, between the 2 adjacent properties, and we feel isn't too imposing in its design and fits well into the street scene. At the moment, the front street scene from Dorchester Road has got a lot of vegetation in it, and we would intend to try and keep some of that, so the building is screened a little bit more than that artist impression gives the impression of. It will be accessed from the existing vehicle and pedestrian accesses from Dorchester Road, but as you can see from this slide, it sits within its own grounds, within the grounds of 45 Dorchester Road, so it's contained. There will be shared parking on site across both properties with a number of parking spaces provided. The main part of the new building is to be 2-storey, that's the front facing part onto Dorchester Road, with a single storey at the rear. We intend the building to be constructed using what is now called modern methods of construction, which means that the majority of the building will be constructed off-site and then craned into place and finished off on-site. This is intended to speed up the construction process, but should also limit disruption on site. It is likely that cranes will be used to place the units on site when that happens, and which at the time may necessitate some local road closures to accommodate this. Should this sort of closure be required, they're usually advertised well in advance, and immediate neighbours will be told nearer the time. To try and make the building fit into a landscape surroundings, a lot of the tarmac that's currently on the site will be removed and put back to landscaped and grassed areas, again to provide outdoor space, which Stuart alluded to, for the young people who'll be living on site. We've also undertaken an ecological survey to look for bats and other small creatures, and whilst we haven't found any bats on site, there could be nesting birds. We will be implementing a biodiversity mitigation plan, which will include the provision of bat boxes, nesting boxes and bee bricks into the new building. We'll also be working to work will be undertaken to crown lift some of the trees on site and look to manage the site a little bit better than it is going forward. We'll also be looking at the boundary with Park Lane to make sure it's tidied up to ensure it's both safe and secure. Next slide, please. This gives you an indication of our timeline from when we started from back in March. In March, Dorset Council's Cabinet gave approval to the business case for this project to move forward. Moving into the summer processes, which is where we are now, obviously we've started the information sharing through the public, and we're working on the planning application details, which will then be submitted probably in the middle of July. We've also begun discussions with Ofsted around registration for the building and the site to be used in the way in which we intend going forward. During the autumn, we expect the planning consultation process to be completed, and we'll also be engaging with young people and care leavers at that time to help with matters such as interior fittings to make sure that this building does provide what we want in terms of a homely feel for it. In the winter, we're expecting the planning committee to meet and we'll know the outcome of the planning application. Once the decision has been made, preparatory works will then commence on site, assuming it's a positive decision, of course. The main construction refurbishment works will then start in the spring. We'll continue also with Ofsted registration and staff recruitment during next summer, and we're anticipating the project will be completed in the winter of next year and then ready for occupation. Next slide, please. I'll hand you back to Teresa now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul and Stuart. And I think, really extensive presentation there in terms of our plans and our intentions. So really, this is now an opportunity for us to come over to you for any questions and answers that you have. So please don't feel shy about speaking out and putting a question and answer in the chat line, and we'll be able to kind of respond to that. And whilst that's happening, I'll just respond to some of the other queries and questions and some of the questions we've asked ourselves over all of this too. So so why Weymouth? Why here? As Stuart said, absolutely a third of our children who are in our care come from the Weymouth or Portland area. So it feels just right that we'd want them to be in their locality too, and that's not to say it will only be Weymouth children in the home, of course, because it will be about matching the right children to that at the right time. What will it be like? How will that be? So it will definitely be homely. The architects and colleagues are working really well to make sure it is homely, and it's a clear and really key criteria for Ofsted now in 2020 that children's homes are just that they are homely and that there are places where children have as close to possible as a family experience as they can have. We understand, and there have been some comments from my own team and from others, that there are some challenges in that local area, both presently and generally. And my personal view is that if you have any part of your place that you're responsible for, that you have some concerns about, have a presence there. Be there and be on site and be ready. So the unit will be well staffed with suitably qualified and experienced people who will be able to make sure that we provide good quality care to our children and ensure that that's well managed. And part of our ongoing conversations with our neighbours will be to be saying we want to be the very best neighbours we can be, and that also means that where possible and where that's manageable, that we can get to know each other, and you can get to know the staff and you can get to know some of the young people. I think it's really important that we're good neighbours together. So that's for us to look forward to as we progress. There have been, excuse me, there have been some queries about size. Some people have said, well, shouldn't we be more ambitious? Shouldn't we have more than 5? If we have, and we do have, about 60 of our children in our care in residential homes outside of Dorset, shouldn't we go for a much bigger style unit? Well, there are lots of reasons not to do that, in that there's some reasons around, I mean, Ofsted are really not very pro big units these days at all, and that's largely because we do find that young people tend to become more likely to get into difficult behaviours and difficult activities in much larger units, and they become more institutionalised. It's not as easy to have it as a family setting. So we think 5's about the right number, but we'll continue to look at that and consult with people on that. And we're really keen to listen very carefully to what our children and young people tell us, to make sure that we'll be able to have the right number and the right children matched in there together. We have had a question previously submitted about planning, and would it be possible, once planning is granted for a children's home, that planning could change? Now, that is a very straightforward but technical answer, which I would really like to give a written response to, and we'll post on our frequently asked questions page. Fundamentally, it probably wouldn't require a change of use if it were a different client group that was going to be housed there. It's not my plan. My plan is that this is a long-term children's home for us, providing long-term care for our children. So that's our plan. But there is a technical question which we'll answer, and we'll get to. So I'm going to come, I think, to Paul Scuthen, who knows the site pretty well, I think, for answering the question around some of the flats at Kildare Court enjoy the sunlight at the moment. Will the new building block out light? Paul, can I come to you for that?
Yes. As part of the planning application process, we will be submitting, there's a technical phrase for it, I can't think quite what it's called, but it's a sort of daylight strategy. So we can track the sun as it moves around through the sky, and we can put that against where the building will be, and it will demonstrate whether there is going to be a loss of sunlight going into those properties in Kildare Court. There shouldn't be those that face the front, because the building line is set back behind the current line of Kildare Court, and I don't think there'll be too much for the windows that may face onto the side, but that will certainly come forward as part of the planning application when it's submitted.
Thank you, that's really helpful. Thanks, Paul. So I'm just checking the Q&A, and we've obviously got some. Thank you. So the sketch view and plans view look different. Plan view, I'm going to come to you about this, Paul, in a moment. So the sketch view and plan view look different. I'm reading it out because if we will be able to publish all the questions, but when people look back on the recording, it's helpful just to have it kind of in the recording too. The sketch view and plan view look different, and the plan view looks as if the new building is closer to Kildare Court than the sketch view. Why will the new building be built so close to Kildare Court rather than the building at 45? Paul.
I think we've tried to place the building on the site in the space that's available, so we've got access along both sides of it. One will be more of an emergency access, so that we've got access. That will be the site probably between Kildare Court, where the existing boundary is, and the side of the new children's home at that point. But we also need to make sure we've got adequate access on the other side, which will be more of a main route of access to get to the rear of the children's home. In terms of the difference in the sketch and the plan view, the plan view is part of what will be done as part of the planning application. That planning application, I think, will also show the distance between that building and the boundary with Kildare Court, so you can see exactly how far away it will be from the two. I'm guessing as well the sketch view, as I said when I was talking earlier on, there's a lot of trees at the moment on the front of Dorchester Road, and they will be retained. So the sketch view is a sort of cleaned version with some of the trees removed. So some of the Kildare Court property is also hidden behind that tree on that sketch proposal. But we've sited the building in what we feel is the best and most suitable location for the purpose in which it's going to be served, and to give adequate access around it.
Thank you, Paul. I'm wondering if you can also it's really important, isn't it, clearly, from the questions that are coming in about people's detail around how the building will be located, and how much more detail there'll be in drawings before planning. There's a question around, will there be windows in the side of the new building facing Kildare Court?
There's certainly no windows in the two-storey bit facing Kildare Court. The windows, as can be seen on the sketch elevation, are mainly on the front of the building. On the single-storey building at the back of the new children's homes, there will be windows. Depending on the use of the rooms, they may be windows that are frosted, so you can't see. They're certainly hidden down behind the fence line that currently exists between Kildare Court and that part of the site. We've tried to make sure that there's no direct overlooking from the children's home into Kildare Court. As I say, it's all single story at that point, so probably sits lower in the ground than the Kildare Court property does.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think there is something around the three-storey building presently providing probably more shadow than the new two-storey building ever could. So that's and I think there is sense that the drawings that you can see at the present time are pretty accurate. They're pretty accurately drawn, but there's something about how we look at those. Yeah, how many weekly family contacts will there be? So our children and having contact with their family is a really important aspect for us around keeping in touch. And we manage that across the widest area of Dorset. So we don't want to really be drawing children into a space that they're not naturally local to. Clearly, we don't want people travelling more than they have to, and we don't want children in and out of cars. So it will be children who are placed locally, who are having contact there, or families who are local to that. It's one of many spaces that we use for children keeping in touch with their important family members. How many that will be, we're still to work up, but it will be obviously limited to the kind of capacity that we have within the building. It's very much a safe and sound activity that we do very often, just to literally keep children in contact with their families. We will have staff located within the main building on a kind of touchdown office basis. It's really important to me, again, as I said earlier, that we have people around and about to make the place feel safe and supported, and the best way to do that, in my experience, is by having our staff there. It may well be that our No Wrong Door team, that team that Stuart was talking about, keeping children out of care where we can, might well be a multi-agency team too, where we have health and police colleagues as part of that. So that's our ambition at the moment, and we're just working that through. So there'll be a lot of opportunity for people to be able to access support where they need it, and for children to be able to access that support by one multi-agency team. So I'm just checking the other chat lines for any other questions. So some of our children who come into our care do go home. In fact, you know, it's often a very positive outcome. Some of our very younger children go on to adoption. I mean, some of our older children go on to adoption too, but it's mostly an outcome for younger children. Many of our children who become looked after move on from children's homes into foster homes, and that's their long-term arrangement. And then sometimes those foster carers take out what's a form of permanency for those children, a special guardianship order, where those children become looked after long-term by those foster home carers. So I'm going to come back to you again in a moment, Paul. We're going to talk a little bit more about the two-storey and one-storey elements of the building, and most of the building will be made off-site. So what materials is the building to be made of? I think it's a very exciting and interesting opportunity. Come to Paul, please.
Yeah, most of the building, its frame and what have you, will be timber. It'll be an off-site timber construction, and then the external skin will be a cladding material.
Paul's
which will be.
That's thank you. You are live now, Paul.
Oh, sorry, I assumed I was alive just now. Apologies. It will be a timber frame building, off-site construction, then craned onto site, and it will then be clad in some material that we will agree with the planning officers is appropriate for that type of building.
Thank you. Just want to go live. Thank you. So that's helpful, and it's obviously by being by the nature of most of it being manufactured off-site, it does minimise some disruption, and it also speeds up the timeline, which we're really pleased about. So the question again, which I think is, which I dealt with earlier, really, is can we guarantee the building will always be a children's home and not change purpose? Insofar as, you know, my position is that that's my vision, is that it's a children's home for us and for many years. Clearly, you know, I can't predict the future, but there is no plan at the present time for it to have a change of purpose. It is, as I said, possible that once a planning permission is given for one client group, it can be used for others, but at the present time, and I'm expecting for the foreseeable and distant future even, our need, 480 looked after children in Dorset, a third of them from the Weymouth and Portland area, 60 of them in residential homes outside of Dorset. Sadly, we don't turn around that sort of profile within a matter of months or even 1 or 2 years. We want to have, and we will always have, you know, we are a reasonably sized county. We'll always have many hundreds of children in our care. We probably have a few more than we might ordinarily have if we look at our statistical neighbours, people like us. But the reality is we'll always have a need for some provision in the county. So my expectation is that it will remain a children's home, but we will post the technical answer to that on the FAQs as well. Thank you. Okay, yes, so I'm just reading the other questions that colleagues have raised or others have raised. So the existing modular buildings will be demolished and taken off site before any of the new build goes on. So that was a kind of question from elsewhere, I think. So just checking in with the Q&A. Didn't say whether 1 story and 2 stories. That's true. I don't know that you did actually, Paul. So I'm going to come back to you and allow you to talk about. So the question really is very specifically, and I'm sure this will be kind of clearer in the drawings later. Where does the 1 story and 2 story part start and end, Paul?
Yeah, apologies, I overlooked that part of the question just now. I don't know if it's possible to flip the presentation back to the proposal slide. That's it. The 2 story part is the longer rectangle between Kildare Court and 45 Dorchester Road, and the single story part is the square towards the back of that part. So there's a clear definition line in the building of what's single story and what's 2 story. Not obvious from that plan, but that's the intention. That's what the single story part is, the part to the rear of the building. Thank you.
Thank you, that's really helpful. Thank you, that's really helpful. Thank you, Paul. Okay, any other questions? Just holding fire for a moment whilst I have a quick chance to have a look at the chain. Yeah, thank you. So given the number of, yes, so well, what we're always looking at in terms of our children is really thinking about where's the best place for them to be. We're looking at all sorts of opportunities around, I'm going to be really upping the campaign around foster homes too. We want, as I've said to you, there's too many children in South County. Some children will always need a very particular specialist provision, and it won't be likely that we can always provide that within Dorset. It probably wouldn't just be financially viable. Some children have very particular specific needs and they need to go to a very specialist place for that, but certainly not in the numbers that they are at the moment. So we may well look for further provision, and we're looking at all sorts of opportunities at the moment. It's really important for us to maximise this time. We've got a lot of great talent on the team. Really looking at developing this, and obviously once you're doing that, then it's about making sure that you maximise the use of that talent. We also have a really supportive marketplace, and so it may be that there are other places, other people rather, who are also well placed to provide within the county, and we'll continue to have those conversations. I'm very pragmatic about having developments of all sorts, as long as we have the right homes in the right places for our children in Dorset. So we will look at a range of places, and we'll make sure that we're developing those as we go. I'm I've cleared this also. I'm really not. I love talking buildings, but I'm not as talented as Paul or anybody else on the call. So I'm going to come back to Paul for the answer to the question, which again I'm going to read out. The roof looks huge. Is it an apex roof? Will there be rooms used in this attic space? Paul.
There won't be any rooms in the attic space. It is a pitched roof. There won't be any access other than maintenance access inside, so there shouldn't be anybody up in the roof. There's certainly no proposals for anything to take place in that roof space.
Thank you. And I can assure you that actually, in terms of, as I know you'll all appreciate, in terms of fire safety and suitable living spaces, Ofsted would have a particular view about that, and I think that would cause us all sorts of problems. So, you know, the kind of registration process is really thorough, as we'd want it to be, and so all of those sorts of matters would need to be detailed well in advance. Okay. So just looking through. So yeah, so our Cherries building, our Cherries home is, thank you to them for the amazing role they've played during COVID-19, supporting and continuing to support our children in care in a very personalised care basis, as you'll understand. Is this still under discussion? The site, sorry, there was talk of the Cherry site being used. Is this still under discussion? So it's really important for us to always make sure that all of our buildings and all of our service spaces are the right place, meeting the needs at the right time. Our children with additional needs and disabilities increasingly require adaptable and flexible accommodation long beyond the time of 18. So we need to also have conversations with our adult services colleagues around what's the required provision for children with additional needs well into their adulthood too. So those conversations are always ongoing. But this children's home piece around Dorchester Road is our present proposal around where we see the first stage of our new developments. I don't think it will be the last development we do, no. Any other questions? It's really helpful to have this opportunity, but it's not quite as straightforward as if we were just kind of sat together having a conversation. It would be much easier, I think, just to explore these things together. So, you know, I look forward to us being able to do that on the other side. But right now, we are in that place where we're all still working virtually together in this way a lot. And I'm very grateful for colleagues and for all of you neighbours and members of the public and others who have come into this call today to be able to have this conversation, because it does allow us, it's really important to me that we continue to move on at pace, even though people have been really stretched with COVID. Our children and young people's needs aren't diminished during this time, as you might well imagine. We have some concerns that for some children and young people in particular, the time of lockdown will have been very difficult. But I would want to pay real gratitude and respect to the children of Dorset, who I think have accepted what in effect has been months of curfew, and in the very greatest part have taken that incredibly well and have managed, maybe being in school, maybe not being in school, but have managed themselves incredibly well, and families have managed that too, in terms of how you know, people have been working from home, they've been working with their children from home, they've been homeschooling at the same time. I mean, I think our families are incredible, but they've been under significant pressure, and we want to provide them with support all the way. So we'll be keeping updates on this important project and any others that we look to develop on the website, and we'll publish those frequently asked questions, those FAQs, so that we can make sure that, you know, people can get access to those questions and answers as quickly as possible. We'll go to planning in the very near future, and that will all be advertised on the website, and that timeline and the other matters that are there will clearly be captured too. But I wasn't going to really let anybody go without a bit of a plea around, you know, we, in addition to these important developments, more than anything else, we need people with big hearts and not necessarily big houses, but big hearts who can really step up and step in and help us with fostering for us and fostering with us. We're really interested in people from all walks of life. You know, there's very few things that we rule out. You do need to have a bedroom for them, and you know, we do obviously rule out people with criminal offences against children. But fundamentally, there's not an age limit. There's no sexuality limits. There's no marital limits. You know, there's no racial limits. It's we need people from all backgrounds, just like we all are, to come forward and register with us. So please do think about that for yourselves and pass it on to your friends and family. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you for your questions. And I hope we've been able to answer them all, but otherwise, please do look on the website and on the FAQs, which we'll publish there. That's brilliant. Thank you.